Our next and final speaker is a great guy. Dr. David Chalmers came all the way from Texas A&M today to talk to us about turf grass. Yeah, well, he had an excuse, but we're still glad he came. He knows plants quite well, and especially turf grass. He has a Bachelor of Science in Crop Science from Michigan State, a Master's in Agronomy from Virginia Polytech, and a PhD in Horticulture from the University of Illinois. He's currently an associate professor and the State Extension Turf Grass Specialist at A&M. He had a similar position at Virginia Tech, and he's taught for over 18 years. And some of that's focused on turf grass. He's done a lot of different research. And if you have a turf grass question, I'm telling you, this is the guy to come to. Please welcome Dr. David Chalmers.
Thanks, Denise. First off, I'm not a beautiful lawn kind of guy. All right? I want everyone to have a lawn to their liking, a turf to their liking, if they choose it to be a component of their landscape. One of the things that I'm starting with in my talks this year is Stephen Best was a golf course superintendent young man who developed a melanoma, skin cancer. And after he did that, he wrote about it during his treatment, and unfortunately he passed away late last year. And during my talks, where this subject isn't really on the agenda, I asked two questions of my audiences, and I started this in January. Of those in the audience, who in the audience has been to a dermatologist within the last 2 or 3 years? Raise your hand. Now, of those people who were at the dermatologist, how many were recommended to have a procedure regarding the skin issue that may have been precancerous or whatever? Raise your hand. Okay. And I'm doing that more of a tribute to Stephen and his writings. I know his writings moved me to go get some checkup, but it's something that we as an industry or as hobbyists, enthusiasts working outside as we do, we can't be neglectful in taking care of those precautions. Okay. I am standing in the way of you in graduation. And probably a late lunch, all right. My title slide, I'm going to stay here. It's about grasses, fertilizer, nutrients, and drought, in that order. And every one of you in this room who's a gardener, it's about measured practices for measured responses. It's about measured rates of what we do with fertility, measured rates about how resistant plants are that we use in the landscape and understanding those plants. And it's to have a predictable resource, whether it's a turf grass, whether it's an ornamental. Now, I used to say there are benefits to turf grass, but I've changed my tune because turf grass is a resource. It has a landscape ornamental benefit. It has a recreational benefit for sports and athletic fields, for footing, for athletic field safety, and for those participating to enhance their skills, because a solid turf provides footing for them to do that. Resiliency for safety. But the landscape function is soil erosion control. It protects the soil as a resource. It's a deep and fibrous root system if the soil's deep enough, okay? Even those grasses that were affected by drought and they were damaged seriously by drought, the root system held the soil in place until that decomposed to the point that soil could move with sheeting rainfall. Heat dissipation, noise abatement, glare reduction in and around highways and the like. When we have turf grass areas, and Daphne talked to you about soils, so you learned about soil structure last week. Well, because turf grass root system sloughs off every year, it adds organic matter to the soil. And by adding organic matter to the soil in areas that aren't trafficked, it can help form soil structure. So on native grassland kind of prairies, they have good soil structure, readily infiltrate water because of good soil structure, and can affect groundwater recharge with good soil. Because the soil has the organic component from the root system, I know I sat in first half and there was talk about pesticides or as I like to say, plant protectant chemicals. Let's see if they have a purpose and a use, and you make a judge accordingly. But those products don't stay around forever because the organic matter in the soil supports a high microbial population that breaks down applied products, okay, to inactive forms. And then safety in vehicle operation. The reason the roads are mostly grass, and why do they mow the roadsides? Once a year, minimum. Maybe fire, maybe deer. It's to keep the woodies down because it's not a safe exit if there's woodies in that environment. It's to keep the woody plant materials down. Facilitates sight lines for security, reduce fire hazard if your home isn't in and amongst a bunch of trees. And that was a shame in Bastrop last year. And then one master gardener told me she likes turf because she can see the snakes in the grass. She can't see the snakes in as many ornamental beds. So, and it does have economic value as well. This room's an interesting room because that screen's so far back, and these screens you're looking at, so bear with me. Grass is the only plant material in the landscape that we actually use. We walk on it, we drive around it, we park our cars on it, we run around in cleated shoes on it. And in this botanical garden north of Mendocino, California, there's a sign there that says, please stay on the grass. Grass is meant to be used, all right? If it breaks from too much traffic, we fix it. One of the reasons that in that botanical garden, we have ornamental beds that have built-up soil, high organic matter content, and we have the walkways that are grass, probably unimproved soil. Now, when we use turf grass, we do two things to it. We wear out the grass from physical abrasion, and that's most common on fields of fixed dimension like sports fields, football fields, between the hash marks. But we also compact the soil, all right? And when we compact the soil, reduced aeration in the soil, root systems need air to take up water and nutrients, and so the roots start creeping more towards the surface and rely only on surface rooting because that's where the air is. And so in turf systems, sports fields, golf courses, we come in and core cultivate or aerify to alleviate that kind of compaction force. But we do traffic turf. I like to bring things in from other sections. Now, in 2008, that's when Atlanta had hits huge drought. And the Georgia Urban Agriculture Council tried to come up with a definition of what urban agriculture was. And mostly what we say is it's not cows and plows, okay? But we need something more defined. So I wordsmith their definition, and I come up with urban community landscape agriculture. It's not just urban agriculture. Community has an aspect of what you do impacts what I have to deal with through runoff or nutrient loss or everything. So when we talk about urban community landscape agriculture, we're all in it together, watersheds and the like. And what it does, I borrowed some of their definition, mitigates man's land altering activity. We don't have native sites in an urban environment that has disturbed soils. So we're trying to mitigate the effects of a development in the urban sector to try and then enhance quality of life. All the plants we're talking about through this whole 6-week program, enhancing the quality of life, and you choose how to do it by what you use, by improving environmental, economic, and social sustainability. Environmentally adapted, without environmental insult. Economic, I know, since 2009, the economic aspect of what I do in dealing with golf courses that have been hit, independent school districts having to manage turf with less funds, less fertilizer for sod production, it's been significant. So we try and do the best we can then. And then there's the social sustainability, which speaks to societal issues regarding water and resources and the like of our constructed natural landscapes. So turf grass, as I speak to it, it has a role in recreation, sport, ornament, and environmental protection. Now, I like graphs, I like diagrams, I'm sorry. But when we do research and extension to come up with recommendations, whether it be on IPM or grass, we consider those factors that are going to drive research or drive what you do: environmental issues, economic issues, and societal issues. So we try and do researchable knowledge. We put them into studies, and I'll show you a few that we have ongoing at A&M now. And we test them for 2 years in the field and come up with, put the statistics to it and make sure that it performs the same way 95% of the time. We're not recommending something that only performs 5% of the time. We want something to be a concrete recommendation in order for it to withstand scrutiny. So we come in and we come up and we have science-based proven recommendations. Now, this I have coined in the phrase of drought. In terms of a San Antonio drought study I'll show you that we did in 2006 and 7, we did research on 60-day drought tolerance of 25 grasses. And we came up with a recommendation that they could use. Now, what did the drought do to us last year, or the last 18 months or so? What happened, societal issues regarding water shortages caused communities to protect water supplies and immediately go to recommendations regarding water restrictions. So the research aspect may play into a part, but they may be totally separate avenues for coming up with a result. Our goal at A&M is to provide information to help communities make more informed decisions. Okay, so now, again, a little more philosophy. Again, I'm not a beautiful turf kind of guy, but there's an amenity that we have with all the plants we bring to the landscape. An amenity is defined as the pleasantness of the place. And I love the thesaurus. It says comfort, benefit, feature, advantage when we talk about the amenity. And plants provide us comfort, features, and advantages that we enjoy in the landscape and we want others to understand. And turf can provide that as well. We all know that that turf that's fertilized fairly well. How many people are from the north here? I grew up in Michigan. How many people are from the north? Okay. When you take your shoes and socks off on Kentucky bluegrass or ryegrass in the north, it's a different feel than Bermuda grass, isn't it? Or St. Augustine grass. All right. But that aside, I digress. But there's an amenity to it, the green, the quality of it, it's great. But there's also a utilitarian aspect, meaning that it's designed to be useful and practical rather than attractive. Now, we all have relatives like that, don't we? All right. But the thesaurus says, practical, functional, pragmatic, serviceable, useful, sensible, efficient, workaday, no frills, plain, unadorned. We can have turf on the highways. It doesn't have to be beautiful. You can have turf in your lawn that has an adequate amount of density that's still going to keep the soil in place. You can use modest amounts of turf if you choose to and spend time increasing ornamental beds. If you don't have a reason to play outside, you may not have a reason for turf except as a ground cover. But can we have both? And my challenge regarding turf is both have function in our society and both should be concerned by regulatory agencies. Now, what do we say when a grass is truly adapted? That means the grass type species, Bermuda or zoysia or buffalo or St. Augustine, and varieties truly adapted to climate and use when it performs well with normal maintenance. Well, that means it's going to persist with modest effort and input. We have some of those years. We don't have a lot of those years because in Texas, water, when you get going west and approaching 35 and further west, becomes more limited in our annual rainfall. Grasses that are most adapted in Texas is probably Port Arthur, where it gets a lot of rainfall, not a lot of supplemental irrigation, and you can grow a lot of different types of grasses. So in Texas, periods of prolonged drought must be effectively managed, and we just hopefully are coming out of one or still living in one, yet to be determined. Now, in part of the handout materials that are posted on the web, I have a turf grass selection in Texas brochure, and these maps are in that. They don't come out as color in your handout, but they are posted on the web at the Grow Green site. So these areas of adaptation mean it's adapted in the green area. The orange area means it's adapted with higher maintenance, typically more water. And then the white area means there's a better grass adapted. Now, if we look at it, Bermuda grass and zoysia grass can certainly go to I-35 and west. Less rainfall going that way, so more of an irrigation requirement. But when we get to far west, even it needs more concern or more issue regarding moisture. St. Augustine grass, really as we approach I-35 from an applied irrigation standpoint, it requires more. We have it in Midland, Odessa, and Abilene. Why? It's the most shade-tolerant warm season grass we have. Now, when does St. Augustine become herbaceous ground cover and stop being a turf grass? When? Maybe when you stop mowing it. You could still, you trim your herbaceous ground covers, don't you? Keep them contained. So in shaded situations, St. Augustine is a resource because with shade, it's going to use less water. And it may be just perfect for certain sites that are contained in shade in various parts of the state. And then buffalo grass, really it starts about I-35 because about 20 to 25 inches of rainfall a year is as much as it can take, or you'll have other things invade, like Bermuda grass or weeds. And so the natural selectivity for buffalo grass is less rainfall than that or applied irrigation a year. So let's look at each one of these grasses, this little baseball card kind of thing, and a snapshot. Bermuda grass has both stolons and rhizomes. It's invasive, or can be. Our nitrogen requirement we'll get to, it ranges from 2 to 6 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. And one of the handouts is a turf fertilization for Texas grasses posted on the web. Oh, thank you. I'm not going to have enough time to drink. Thank you. Very good drought tolerance. You'll see that it survives 60 days without water in San Antonio. Mowing height, we've got golf course putting greens. It could be mowed 1/10 of an inch, or it could be mowed at 3 inches, or it could be unmowed as a common type if you chose. It will thatch under high irrigation and high fertility, but if that's modest, it may not thatch, it won't thatch as much. Winter overseeding is typically done for winter green in color, maybe in the outdoor room that you want, usually perennial ryegrass. And there are vegetative types and there are seeded types. Sod producers typically grow the vegetative types. Those that don't produce viable seed or are sterile, that they don't produce viable seed that way, or don't produce enough seed. And I've been an advisor, technical advisor to our turfgrass producers of Texas, who have been very supportive of turfgrass research at Texas A&M. I've given a lot of examples of common type seeded Bermuda grasses and vegetative Bermuda grasses. The difference in varieties comes down to how much input you need to make it look good, okay? Tifway, sometimes referred to as 419, is the grass we have as our football field at A&M on Kyle Field. And to make it look good in a sports field or on a golf course fairway or a football field, that's its suitability. In a lawn, it may be more management that you want as far as how much fertility you need to put on. It's a moderate to moderately high fertility to maintain the density. Where other grasses like common or celebration may get by with a little less fertility than Tifway. And the common types from seed can be planted as seed. Seed is viable, and that's planted when the nighttime temperatures are above 60 degrees consistently so the seed can germinate. So that's in one of the handouts as well. St. Augustine grasses are all vegetative. You might see some on the web, but seed sources are highly irregular in providing uniform quality as far as the lawn. The nitrogen requirement can be quite low and really modest for home lawns that have been established for a while. Drought tolerance, it has good drought tolerance. It can have a deep root system on a deep soil. Irrigation to persist in central and west Texas during periods of dry times and drought. Best shade tolerant grass we have, the St. Augustine grass. Some of the varieties, Amerishade, Delmar, Palmetto, Raleigh, Seville, Texas Common, those are more shade tolerant than Floratam. Floratam is a drought tolerant St. Augustine, you'll see in a bit, but it's also susceptible to cold. So that's a coastal St. Augustine. South side of San Antonio, maybe San Antonio would be as far north or inland as you would bring it because it can chill out in the winter. Common insects are chinch bugs and common problems. St. Augustine decline is not really an issue much with new varieties. Brown patch is a common problem where we have moist conditions in the spring, moist conditions in the fall. It's a fungal disease. And there's one, take-all root rot, which is one that seems a secondary pathogen where we don't have a healthy turf site as far as drainage, aeration, nutrients, too much shade. There's more of a holistic approach because take-all root rot can infect the roots to the point where they become dysfunctional during the summer and the grass dies back. Has anyone had that? It's a disappointing disease, isn't it? Okay, peat moss is a management program where Canadian sphagnum peat moss at 1 or 2 bushels per 1,000 square feet is a management program done once a year or twice a year to start and then backing off. And that seems to provide a holistic benefit, not really a fungicide benefit, but it has shown to be an advantage. And there's precious little that we can do at the time we see it to control it. I'm sorry? Stop fertilizing. Okay. It's remarkable the organic matter that we have turning over on an annual basis from root systems and grass typically provides about a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year in a somewhat managed system. Question in the back? Most commonly used is a low to high maintenance lawn. With all our plants in turf, we have some that may fit into a low management program, established St. Augustine in a shade, decent soil, can get by with low fertility, low inputs, with fertility mostly. Or if we take it into a high development area, commercial property, they may put more and more fertilizer on it to make sure it has that jalapeno green all the time. All right, where that's not necessarily needed. So we have a choice that grasses, you can over-manage them. You can overwater them, over-fertilize them, and you don't have to do that. You need to know what niche the grass fits in and if it's suited for your particular landscape. And we can go into a lot of depth on that, but we don't have time. We might pick up pertinent questions later. Okay. Zoysia grass, it's a good central Texas grass, grows with stolons and rhizomes. It's a slower spreader than is Bermuda grass. It's a very low nitrogen requirement grass. One or two applications a year is fine on established zoysia grass. And it has moderate shade tolerance as well. It has very good drought tolerance, as you'll see in some comparisons I'll show you in a bit. Can tolerate a light to moderate amount of shade. Now, shade is something we really need more quantitative research on, but we say to grow St. Augustine well, you need about 4 hours of sunlight minimum a day. All right? Now that might be morning sun, afternoon sun underneath the trees. And the other thing with shade, it doesn't stay the same every year. It gets denser, it gets wider. if trees have water to grow. Mowing height 1 to 2 inches on zoysia grass. If you get it much higher than that and you let it go too long for miss a mowing, it's very hard to bring down to that height because it is such a dense grass. And it dulls the more quicker than the other grasses do. Thatch can be a problem under high fertility programs. Higher management, you'll increase the thatch layer, which is all the buildup of the stolons and rhizomes, elevates the crown, and you have a very puffy organic layer. And then you want to avoid thatch in any grass system, only a modest amounts. And so you monitor that. We don't overseed because it's so tight, it doesn't accept ryegrass for winter overseeding. Much better cold tolerance than some Bermuda grasses, but that's not an issue here in Texas. But it's a good low maintenance lawn once established with tolerance into shade. And in the handout I've given you on the web, there are improved types, which are Zoysia japonica, which is Japanese lawn grass. Palisades and Jammer are 2 examples of that. A modest texture, finer than St. Augustine. It's a very good lawn grass, very appealing. Does well with 1 fertilizer application a year, keeps its density. And then there are somewhat higher maintenance types that are Matrella type, and the 2 most common are Royal and Xeon. These are grasses that you could mow at a ½ inch if you wanted to. Maintain density, still with low inputs. And a number of golf courses have gone towards putting those on golf course fairways for lower fertility inputs and better playability. But it really isn't a sports turf kind of grass, it's more of a lawn kind of grass, zoysia grass. But it is coming over here. The Matrella types have a little bit better shade tolerance than the Japanese lawn grass types.
What about the emerald?
Emerald is an older zoysia grass that is more prone to thatch with higher levels of fertility in water. I think the Xeon and Zorro has bypassed the emerald. It's a pretty grass. It's a very fine texture grass. You just got to make sure you watch you don't get too much thatch on it.
Where does it fall as far as like shade tolerance?
I would think it would be closer to the japonica. I don't know if it goes where the Matrella will go. Buffalo grass, it is a very good low maintenance grass. Modest amounts of fertility once it's established. Recognize that grasses, as with most plants, they need a little more care during establishment, don't they, to get them well rooted. And with grasses that might be 1 or 2 years, and then you can cut back on the nitrogen. Excellent drought tolerance, not shade tolerant, it's an open sun grass. 1 to 3 inches if mowed. If I go to Kerrville, they'll mow it once a year and let it grow up to 6 inches and not worry about it if it's not in a lawn maintenance kind of format. Not likely to thatch, not overseeded, less than 20 inches a year. Some of the varieties have a gray-green appearance to it. So the tendency is, well, I'll put more fertilizer on it. I need to water it more because it doesn't look as green as I think it should look. And then you get Bermuda grass invading and other winter weeds invading. And there's not a lot of herbicide controls for weed control that labeled for buffalo grass. In eastern Texas, higher rainfall just would have everything run all over it. The vegetative types or seeded types, prairie is one that's been out a while, not so much. 609 is available. Density is one available out of Blade Runner turf in San Antonio. That is a bit greener in characteristics, still with the characteristics of the buffalo grasses as far as less water requirement than Bermuda grass or zoysia grass for management. Tech turf is one we hear a lot of advertisements for, from Turfalo is the company, and it's a good buffalo grass. It performs similar to other buffalo grasses, and it did better in the first year of a trial than it did in successive years, but it's a buffalo grass, so it's one that's only available as plugs in the advertisements. It's not available as sod or seed. Yes? Top Gun is still around as a seeded variety, I believe. So the seeded types are very large seeds, more of a burr, and it takes patience to go to seed buffalo grass to get it established, but it is an option. But you expect a relatively modest turf quality out of it, but it is an option. Now, I was at Blade Runner Turf, and they're developing this new turf grass, and I showed it at this program last year. Most buffalo grass is dioecious. That means there's male plants and there's female plants. Most of the turf types are the female plants because typically with turf you don't want the seed heads floating around and the seed heads are down in the canopy. They've selected for this male buffalo grass. On this side of the picture is all the seed heads are mowed and it's maintained closer. On the left side of the picture, it's more of a native grass kind of look, a higher mowing height, not mowed during that seeding period. So it has a pleasant appearance to it that might be something you would want to put in your landscape in an area that would have modest water requirement, and you might like the seed head twice a year when it goes to seed and lasts for a week or two or three. It's one they've just marketed and patented. We do not have data on it, but it's called Eco Buffalo Grass. It seems to perform well in their trials, and it's got a brighter green appearance than does the 609, which is more of a blue-green. So it may be more pleasing to the eye. Not a recommendation, but if you wanted to try it, you could probably get it. Okay, questions on grasses. We're going to nutrients next. Yes?
It seems really weird to me that the Bermuda grass grows where I don't want it to grow, like in the flower beds, and it doesn't grow in the yard where I want it to grow. And I'm wondering if that's partly compaction from walking.
The question is that the buffalo grass is growing well in the ornamental bed, or Bermuda grass is growing well in the ornamental beds, but not growing as well in the grass where it's planted. Now, in the grass system, we've got a tighter soil, maybe compacted. Tighter soils use fertilizer less efficiently. Tighter soils absorb less water. So the maintenance level may have to be picked up to have it grow well there. If I'm a buffalo or Bermuda grass, I'm going to where the better soil is anyway. All right, it's looser. I got no obstacles of growing into a bed, and I can make up some headway pretty quick. All right, so the thing about getting buffalo grass out of bedding plants is you need to make sure you get not only the surface runners, but the underground rhizomes, or it's going to come back. Other questions on grasses? Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on
Celebration
celebration?
is a more recent development of a Bermuda grass. It's licensed out of Sod Solutions out of South Carolina. It's a very dense blue-green Bermuda grass. So they purport it to be more shade tolerant, but the relative shade tolerance compared to other Bermuda grasses, not really compared to a St. Augustine or zoysia grass. So, and it is a little more aggressive with fertility, okay? We had it in our San Antonio drought trial. It did very well, 60 days without water in an imposed drought after being established from sod. It's a good grass. It may be prone to thatch under higher management. Golf courses, because of its aggressiveness, are using it more on practice tees because it heals divots a little quicker. But it's a good choice, and you can. I think it's probably more suitable as a lawn grass than 419 because 419 would kick up the nitrogen level and the management a little bit. I think it appears to have a little better density with less fertility. Okay, moving on, because you're graduating soon. You probably know more about non-point source pollution in Austin than most communities in Texas. Non-point source pollution means the pollutants aren't coming out of a big culvert from a factory. The non-point source pollution issue, and I dealt a lot of this when I was in Virginia, in and around the Chesapeake Bay, is we don't want the additive effects of applications of fertility to lawns or other areas to cumulatively move into water, groundwater, or move into surface waters. So it's all of agriculture, it talks about agronomic basis and science. It's environmentally sensitive and it's business oriented. So if you're in the business of making sure your customers understand that your nutrient management plan, it's not your fertilizer program. If you want to be politically correct, it's not your fertilizer program anymore, it's your nutrient management plan. All right? And in many cropping systems, I know Virginia just passed rules. If you're growing over 5 acres of turf, you need to have a nutrient management plan on file on how you're putting nutrients down and approved. It's going to come to Texas eventually. But it also may be a source of ordinances. So it's phosphorus and nitrogen are the big issues. And nitrogen and phosphorus application, nitrogen is potential to leach or it's a potential to run off. EPA standards for drinking water is 10 milligrams per liter for adults, but 3 milligrams per liter in wells could indicate a human impact of enrichment. In infants, it's methemoglobinemia, which is the blue baby syndrome that is the problem with nitrate-enriched waters. So we want to have controlled amounts of nitrogen going on and only put phosphorus down if the soil test implies that it's needed and not do it indiscriminately. You guys are very informed about groundwater, the Edwards Aquifer. But typically, you have to realize that stream flow and groundwater interchanges at times. So if the pollutants enter surface waters, they could also go back into an aquifer or enter an aquifer and go into a stream. So it's, you have to have an appreciation for that. But you're very familiar with aquifers, and I just thought we'd touch on that. But whenever we get nutrient enrichment with nitrogen and or phosphorus or together, we have an increase in algal growth, reduced water clarity. We have water treatment problems in odor and bad taste, increased filtration costs. If you're a sportsman and a fisherman, the habitat for fish, the subaquatic vegetation decreases, less oxygen level in the water, and because of the algal growth. And it's just not a good thing. So as far as the nutrients we put down, we want to manage them. How is phosphorus runoff measured in turfgrass systems? Well, what happens is this is a rainfall simulator, all right? A rainfall simulator. It also could be a shower for 10 close friends. But here we've got a rainfall simulator nozzle that would put out about 2 inches per hour, and it would fall on the plot that would be treated with a amount of fertilizer, and then you would see on the slope how long it took for those product rates to run off. So this has been done in turf and continues to be done. Also has been done in field crops. These are the kinds of tests to know what the issues are with phosphorus movement. So phosphorus typically moves it with soil particles into water bodies. So soil particles that are loose and unprotected that have been fertilized, like in field crops, can move with sheeting water. In turf systems that hold the soil together, if phosphorus has been applied, enriched, where you put it out every year for years and years and years, now it can be solubilized and it can move as well. So that's when we get into land application of composted manures and stuff, too much phosphorus, so there are restrictions and nutrient guidelines with those. So this is one of the ways nutrients are measured from runoff. One of the systems we have going in at A&M now, and this is being constructed, we have a runoff plot area that has 24 to 26 individual plots that are going to be treatable, 13 feet wide, 26 feet high on a 4% slope. Each one of these things are 13 feet wide, and these 13-foot plots will then flow into these grates that are 13 feet wide between the plots. the runoff will be discharged and collected by an automatic sampling device. And the Scott's Miracle-Gro Company, through a joint research project, has supported this so far to the tune of $250,000. It's going to be the largest turf runoff facility in the country, if not the world. And so the idea here is to have measured, researchable data on applied products, lawn care products, to make sure there's no environmental insult. And so this will be in play for this fall. That was just taken last week. So a lot of efforts going into that. Application concerns, because it can run off from saturated soils and too much application at the wrong time of year. We need to make sure we don't directly apply it to hard paved surfaces. And here you can see when I was in Chesapeake Bay area, Chesapeake Bay drainage, don't dump. But you don't put fertilizer to spill out on an area either. This area here was fertilized by a lawn care company the day before with a spinner spreader, put prills out there and prills out into there. With a spinner spreader, there are some ill-designed areas of turf that are hard to manage. And that's got a big crown to it as well. And this one here, that's got to be micromanaged with maybe just a spray application if nutrients are applied there. So it doesn't hit a hard paved surface, direct entry into water. Now, deep breath. This is a teachable moment for everyone. I want you all to go to fertilizer stores from now on and ask yourself, how many pounds of nitrogen are in that bag? This is like a story problem. Train leaves Houston at 30 miles per hour, going to Memphis. Train leaving Memphis, going at 80 miles per hour, headed towards Houston. When will they meet? It's not that difficult. But you have all these fertilizers in play. And they're pretty bags, aren't they? There's some pretty bagged garden products. But the soil test is going to say if you need phosphorus, if you don't apply it. And you soil test every 2 to 3 years in a lawn scenario. If you need potassium, if you need calcium, magnesium, and other nutrients. Our nitrogen program is not relying on soil testing because we don't do it all the time. We don't do it every year. Our nitrogen program is based upon when the grass is actively growing and an amount to provide low, moderate, or high quality. So we're going to come back to these fertilizer products. All will be various in price. You have this publication on the website. It's Lawn Fertilization in Texas, Warm Season Grasses. And I put this together for the whole state, and it's based upon freeze dates. So when's your growing season? My growing season for warm season grasses is I don't want to fertilize too late when it can't take up the nutrients. So I take the anticipated first freeze date in the fall and I come back 6 weeks, and that would be the absolute last time I would think about putting a fertilizer down because I want it to be in the plant. In the spring, I want to wait until the grass has been mowed 2 to 3 times, or nighttime temperatures, combination of nighttime temperatures above 60 degrees consistently, and the last frost state for Austin in the spring, then go into towards the summer 6 weeks, and that's when you start your fertilizer program. So if you put nitrogen out when it's actively growing, it takes it up because the root systems are very deep and fibrous. If you put it out before it's actively growing, it can, if it's soluble, it can dissolve. It could leach in sandy soils, or with sheeting rain or irrigation, it could run off. Those are precautions. So there's a lot of questions there that I ask. What if you don't fertilize? Well, we fertilize first, not for color, but to maintain density of our lawn. We will get some improvement in color along with it. Typical lawn recommendations for homeowner-type fertilizer products suggest applying 1/2 pound of nitrogen to 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. The Grow Green program suggests 1/2 pound on sites that are environmentally sensitive over the Edwards Aquifer, because that's as much as you want to make sure. You don't want to overload the system more than a grass could take it up when it's actively growing. So if we had a bag of fertilizer, if we're applying 1/2 pound of fertilizer, 1/2 pound of nitrogen, we have any number of products to select from to deliver 1/2 pound of nitrogen to the site. That's where we're going. And remember, you can eat lunch after this is over. The publication here gives various recommended rates for low, moderate, or high management levels for common Bermuda grass, hybrid Bermuda grass, buffalo, centipede. St. Augustine in the sun needs more nitrogen than it does in the shade. So that ground cover St. Augustine in the shade, you can fertilize less. And zoysia grass, probably the zoysia grass recommendation is 1 to 2 pounds per thousand, and this is per year, okay? If I want to put out 2 pounds of nitrogen to zoysia grass or St. Augustine grass, do I do it all at once? No, because we said no more than 1/2 pound to 1 pound at a time. So we need to split our applications. I'll show you where we're going. So you have a choice of how much you want to maintain your lawn. Now, if we start with a low program, apply nitrogen during the spring and or late growing season, at least 6 weeks before frost. This program works well where 1 or 2 applications are adequate. So if we had that 1 to 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, we would split that up into at least 2 applications, a spring and a fall. If you wanted a Grow Green recommendation of 1/2 pound plus 1/2 pound, it would be spring with 1/2 pound, fall with 1/2 pound. If you wanted to get a little more growth from damage from last year, and you may put 4 times 1/2 pound down, or use a slow release fertilizer. You have a lot of choices. If you need a new lawn grown in, maybe you go to a moderate program. So in addition to the low, you make 1 additional supplemental summer application to enhance the density. Yes?
I believe you said earlier, if I understood correctly, that by thatch and other methods, grasses will produce their own nitrogen to the tune of,
You're using my own words against me. I did say that. Now,
you said approximately 1/2 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot per year.
I say in a managed system where we're putting fertility on a grass, that the roots breaking down can provide nitrogen back to the system, the organic matter breakdown, up to maybe 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. So that's a buffer that if you didn't fertilize, maybe you could use that for a while and then the grass might thin out. So it doesn't maybe change overnight just because you missed a fertilizer application. There's a little buffer in the system. I guess that's what I should have said a little bit.
I was wondering, would that be added into this? I guess it'd be too hard to measure.
Well, that's one of the things I just want you to be aware of, because if you cut fertilizer out and you stop fertilizing in any way, shape, or form, the contribution from organic matter would be less and less and less because you're producing less roots each year. But you may get by for a couple years, depending on what the expectations were. Did Daphne show this last week? She talked about fertilizer bags. Wonderful. God bless her. All right, you got all these fertilizers at the garden center. Your sole mission is to find out how many pounds of nitrogen are in each bag, so you know how many pounds of nitrogen you're buying, so you know how much ground you can cover. And I've listed it out. This one here is a 13-13-13 fertilizer. It's the All-American brand. It's the most unlucky fertilizer you can buy. It's $5.58. It's a 40-pound bag. 13% by weight times 40 means there's 5.2 pounds of nitrogen in that bag. That means if I put 1 pound down per 1,000, I could cover 5,000 square feet. if I put a half a pound down per thousand, I could cover 10,000 square feet. Some bags will say this product covers 5,000 square feet, as these bags do. And this is 4.6 pounds of nitrogen is in this bag that's 2934.29 times 16-pound bag, 4.6 pounds of nitrogen. So you give up your control if you just let them determine how much the rate is. Question?
So the numbers, the three numbers on the fertilizer bags are the percentage of the total weight.
That is that nutrient. So the first number is actual nitrogen. So that converts right to pounds of nitrogen. 10 minutes. Very good. Very good. Yes, P2O5, phosphate the second, potassium the third. So is this hard? It's not like a story problem, is it? And you can read the publication for reference, should you wish to. And then you have a choice of what analysis to use. And I have this table in the publication where it's a 15 question mark, question mark. Why don't I give you an analysis there? Those question marks are there because ideally, a soil test every 2 to 3 years will tell you whether you need phosphorus or not, whether you need potassium or not, or you can use straight nitrogen. And then there's a rate for each one of those at various nitrogen rates per thousand. So you apply the nitrogen and you choose an analysis on what needs to come along with the nitrogen in turf systems. Okay. Now, here's your Austin paragraph, right here on page 7. Keep these guidelines in mind when fertilizing. Lower nitrogen rates are appropriate not only for low maintenance lawns, but also for lawns in environmentally sensitive areas. Page 7, watersheds and nutrient management. At-risk watersheds are areas that are especially vulnerable to water quality problems. In these areas, special care must be taken to manage nutrients so that you reduce the loss of phosphorus from runoff and nitrogen from runoff and leaching into the groundwater. In Texas, at-risk areas include karst landscapes formed on limestone rock and porous rock channels that enhance subsurface water flow. That's the Edwards Aquifer, folks. So lower rates is appropriate. I learned things coming to Austin over the 10 years. Okay, now if you're going to choose a slow release fertilizer, know that it would be listed in the bag that this is a 20-0-10, but the nitrogen component can be slow release. It can be coated with sulfur. It can be polymer coated. It can be a natural organic that may give you some slow release characteristics. I always put in Miracle Grow here because everyone will hug Miracle Grow. The same principles apply. A little pound packet of Miracle Grow, how many pounds of nitrogen are in that packet? Well, the analysis here, it says 24% nitrogen. If I've got a pound packet of Miracle Grow, that means I have almost a quarter of a pound of nitrogen in that packet. If you wanted to, you could fertilize your lawn with Miracle Grow. Quarter pound per 1,000 square feet, half pound per 1,000 square feet, you could do that. If you got a little small yard area, what better way to apply small amounts of nitrogen? The measured amounts to measured areas. Now this also has micronutrients and the like. Here are my times to apply. First application in Austin, April 15th. Now everyone, if the fertilizer's on sale, yeah, go buy it, but wait. Wait till the lawn's more actively growing. Wait till we have nighttime temperatures above 60 degrees. When to stop? First frost about December 1, come back 6 weeks, have all your nitrogen on by October 15th. So we can thicken up and recover from the ravages of summer if we have some issues. And these are in the publication. A lot of nitrogen sources will vary in green up. Some will provide more green up. The ones on the, this is 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 here on Slow release sources only, a check plot, and then other different lawn type fertilizers. Okay, let's get to water. And I will try and end 10 minutes after 1. If someone has to leave, please do. I won't think less of you. But here's our drought monitor, February 21. Okay, we are still, I'm not accepting that one. It is what it is. But we are scarred from our drought monitor at the end of the season last year. We still feel that. We still know we could fall back into that. We still know water restrictions can be an issue. And we are in a period of drought that may, you know, the climatologist says it may last longer, and then he says, same breath, it might not too. It all depends on El Nino. In November, in the drought of 2011, there were over 700 water systems that had restrictions in place in Texas. And we look at the metroplexes of Austin to San Antonio, even Houston. Lake Conroe, really quite low, which shocked Houston, and the metroplex up here. And Karen Guz is the administrator of San Antonio Water System Conservation Group. She gave a talk at our Texas Turf Conference in December, and they were almost to the point of going to stage 3, which they had never been to. We've got places in Texas that are at stage 4, no watering. It's wicked. This spring, we're going to find out what our winter rains and relatively warm temperatures has allowed as far as various plants to recover. And, but water restrictions are a way of life. Conservation is a way of life. Yet some water systems need to sell water to make their budgets because they don't plan that into the drought program. So anyway. In the older times, when people weren't as aware, you could have 40% of the summer water used outside the home. The issue is that we need to realize is home consumers have a heavy reliance on green color for health of the grass. If Bermuda grass is straw-colored, dormant brown, but alive, is that a good thing or a bad thing in a drought if you're not watering? It's good if it can come back, and that's where we're going. But if folks don't consume or conserve, then water authorities seem to have to be more restrictive in how their policy, because they can't count on their citizens to conserve. That's the difference between Austin and San Antonio, where the citizens are in tune, and if conservation is needed, conservation happens. You compare that with DFW area, its per capita water use is much greater. So if not addressed, consumer behavior makes it difficult for conservation to happen. Communities then move to provide incentives to reduce the size of turf areas, and communities move to alternate landscape plantings perceived to be more efficient. Your relatives are going to ask you, what the heck did you learn in that turf section today? You really haven't had an affinity for turf. And you're going to proudly go back to them and say, if you don't know this already, that if I put an inch of water on the landscape, an inch of water, which is a common weekly recommendation, that's equal to 62/100ths of a gallon of water per square foot. So if you have 1,000 square feet of turf or garden that you're putting an inch of water on per week, that's going to use 620 gallons of water for an inch. And that's typically our standard to manage turf without too much stress. 1 inch of water per week. Can you effectively put that out with your irrigation system? Now, we have weather stations as part of the Texas ET network. Was that covered at all? The Texas ET network? Okay. Well, the website is on the handout, texaset.tnu.edu. There is a weather station for Austin. I'm going to show you that data. It measures the evapotranspiration data, of which we don't put all that back. We put something that's only needed for the crop we're growing, in this place, turf. So that website's something to go look at, texaset.tmu.edu on your handout or on the web. So our warm season grasses can do well with 60% of what the weather station reports. That's how we get. Did you ever wonder where this 1-inch recommendation comes from? You should. If we have a 1/4 inch of water loss per day during the summer, and it may be a tweak more than that, but if we go a 1/4 of an inch per day of evapotranspiration, and we come up with 7 days, that's 1.75 inches per week that the weather station might read, and predictive. But our turf coefficient for grasses, warm season grasses, is only 60% of that. So if you multiply 60% times 1.75, you come out to have 1.05 inch. To have warm season grasses that are pretty healthy. That's where the 1 inch comes from. Cool season grasses require more than that. There are crop coefficients during the summer of 60%, but during March it's only 30%. So we don't need that inch or that full crop coefficient here at this time of year. The numbers are going to be less because less heat, cloudy conditions and the like. What I want to show you are some results that we did in research. So no stress, turf coefficient is 60% of what the weather station says. And then you can cut back 60% again, or 40% of that, 1 inch a week. So instead of 1 inch a week, you'd be putting 6/10 of an inch down or 4/10 of an inch down. What could you predict that to be? This just shows grass well watered, grass drying down, recovery is possible, might go into a dormancy. That's how grasses go into a dormancy. All of them vary in how that curve looks. This is optimum health here. Normally, during a dry down cycle, we'll let it dry down so much, and then we'll irrigate back. Now, this is Austin data. And this is a weather station, what's recorded there. And this green line here would be how much you would need per month to grow turf without stress. So about 4.3 inches during the summer months. During March, about 1.3 inch. If you wanted to cut it to 60% of that and have some stress on it, but have your grass alive, you would put about 2.5 inches on. Now, a month data, everyone's eyes glass over, so I've tweaked it a bit. I graph it, average rainfall, we have periods of dry times during the summer, and you know, these are based on 30-year averages, and we never have an average year. We have 30 abnormal years that make up our 30-year average. All right, we never have a normal year. Our years are normally abnormal. So this is just how that graphs out. What I want to get you towards is, what would we break that out to weekly to be? Well, during January and February, very little demand, 1/10 of an inch. March, maybe 3/10 of an inch for healthy grass per week. During the summer months, June, July, August, it's about 1.1. Based on historical data, 30-year data for Austin, Texas, it would be about 1.1 inch for healthy grass. But if we wanted to cut it back to be 60% of that, this other yellow line, we would put out about 6/10 of an inch. Our grass might look a little unthrifty, but we're saving 40% of the water applied. That's a real position to stand on. How do we know how much we apply? We use catch cans. Don't care how you catch it, but measure it. We have the Aggie Catch Can, which is on the AgriLife bookstore website. And this measures directly in inches. You run your system, know how long it takes to put 6/10 of an inch out or an inch of water out, and then you adjust it a clock accordingly. Or if you're a hose and sprinkler dragger, adjust your hose and sprinkler dragging setting accordingly. And since this was an Aggie Catch Can, I I advised them to put an arrow this end up, but they didn't. So you'll have to figure that out for yourself. Now, what does the weekly amounts look like? The weekly amounts here, the weather station, are up here. If we just had this average for a month that we could tell our home consumers to say, just put this much out every week and change it once a month. April would be about 0.8 of an inch. And this is total water, whether it's rainfall or irrigation. In last year, it was a dry time, so it only would have been irrigation. So those are how that stair-step approach looks, and when we get to September, we need to back off. We back off even if we're putting on only 60% of what that inch a week is. We back off when we come down to the spring. And what I want to show you, soil depth matters. And what I want to do realistically in 5 minutes, since I've got 4 minutes, but I'm going to stretch it to 5, I'm going to come down, and this is a chart here that just shows you, I'm sorry. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need irrigation. We'd have enough rainfall. When we get into dry times, we have choices here of irrigation with good knowledge and practice, if we can, or when we can, or irrigation with poor knowledge and practice. In extension, we try and move people from not knowing what they know into having an idea of knowing more. So we irrigate good knowledge and practice. What's at risk here for this one is we have a system that's well designed with good distribution across the turf, or one that's the Yugo of irrigation systems. That doesn't, the heads are misaligned, they're not the same size, the outputs are different, it's not uniform, it's highly irregular. So the maximum uniformity we get is 80%. Most systems would be 50 to 60% in home design. We could have some that are worse than that. So then we get down to soil matters, that we have a non-uniform soil or a uniform soil. Uniform soils, it's going to respond very similarly. If we have hot spots or non-uniform, very disturbed soils, it's going to be very hard to irrigate that well. So we'd have to modify the soil or do something to help the soil take in the water. But the best case scenario is uniform, a good system uniformity, good soil, and we can conserve there and have healthy plants. The worst case scenario is poor distribution to a non-uniform soil, and it's, you might as well, you're going to be disappointed. Okay, now I'm going to come down and show you that we're going to do the Cliff Note version here. This is 60 days after shutting off the water in San Antonio in 2006 on 25 grasses. And this grass down here will show you the grasses. It was funded about $135,000 research project over 2 years from San Antonio sod producers. And their whole ordinance said you must have grasses that tolerate 60 days without water for new home construction. For new home construction, you didn't have to replant, just new home construction. And also, if you put in a new home, you had to have 4 inches of soil. Where they came up with 4 inches of soil minimum, I don't know, but in hill country, sometimes that's luxury. So it was a 60-day drought followed by a 60-day recovery period. We planted these grasses in 4-foot by 4-foot squares. And they were planted in 4 replications, where this rep on this side was on a deep soil. This rep was 4 inches of soil over a plastic barrier to simulate what their ordinance would be. And we planted in 4 replications on this site. And we had a 5,000 square foot rainout shelter here at the bottom. It was 50 feet wide by 100 feet long. And it would cover those research plots in 100 seconds when a rainfall event tipped 2 tipping gauges at one end where the electronics were. So 60 days of work, All the Bermuda grasses that are common, St. Augustine, zoysias, and buffalo grass was in there for comparison purposes. That was always going to be recommended. 20 days into a drought, all 4-inch blocks without water totally fired off. No grass came back on 4 inches of soil from 60 days of no water. Now, our producers will say that's not typical of a soil where you're always going to have cracks and fissures in the subsoil, okay? But no grass in either year survived. Now, we kept them well watered to the point we shut the water off, so lack of hardening may have come in. But here, 20 days, 3 weeks into it, St. Augustine grass on a deep soil holding its color. Zoysia grass turning a little off color 20 days into a 60-day drought. Is that good or bad? If you're a native plant person, you're saying, well, by God, the zoysia grass knows what the heck's going on. It's trying to shut down and go dormant. Now, if you're a home consumer and you're saying, but it's not green, I'm going to put more water on it. Jalapeno green is our worst enemy. And Bermuda grass is saying, ho-hum, deep soil, 18-inch soil, deep soil, 21 days, ho-hum, and buffalo grass, the same thing. Now we get 60 days without water. All the zoysia grasses went dormant. Zoysia grass regrowth is slower than Bermuda. A lot of the Bermuda grasses held the color. The green ones in there are buffalo and Bermuda. So if you got green canopy, quicker recovery. Now, if you had a soil that you could turn the water off for 60 days in Austin or San Antonio and grow grass back in September, you'd save some water, wouldn't you? The data said they're going to accept all the Bermuda grasses, the japonica type zoysia grasses, buffalo grass, and only Floratam St. Augustine grass, even though all of them survived at various states. Just numbers, data that supports what I just said. In the second year, again, we planted these in the fall, and then we put the drought on them 10 months later. It wasn't as hot in 2007. Drought damage is two things. It's lack of water, and it's how much heat load you have. A spring drought or a fall drought will be less damaging to grass than will a summer drought with very high temperatures like we had last year. So after 18 days, all of the grasses that were on deep soil, they came all back very quickly. They weren't as damaged like the year before, but nothing came back on 4 inches of soil. Now, the other thing, 5 minutes? 2? All right. I did a study last year. Mother Nature gave me a drought simulator in College Station. What we did is we had research plots that we had it at Weather Station ET, that would be overwatered. We had healthy turf, 6% of that. Then we had 40%, or 6% of that and 40% of that. So, historical averages for College Station. We had replicated irrigation treatments in our study on St. Augustine grass. The idea here, those are the materials and methods. I'm going to get you the pictures. That's the bottom line. The pictures say, overwatered, probably putting out all that 1.75 inches per month, or per week, you're going to have healthy turf, but overwatered. Now, if we put 6% of that on, we're putting about an inch a week down. Grass looks just as good. Little outlier in this plot here, but 3 out of the 4 replications looks pretty good. The whole thing here is we don't have data on how much water you need to keep some plant material alive to get regrowth back. So now let's put out 60% of what the turf crop coefficient is, 6% of that. So now we're down to that 0.6 of an inch per week. Now we see some thinning in one plot, but fairly decent St. Augustine grass for a 3-month period. This is after 3 months of this kind of watering, twice a week. And now we put out 40% of the crop coefficient, and we're starting to show a little thinning, but even if you still have that much St. Augustine, you could recover. That's the point I want to make. We need that kind of research going forward to help municipalities talk about volumes of water that you could put out per week to try and keep plants alive, or use dormancy to avoid putting it out for a 2-month period where you could recover. So with that, these are the numbers on how much we put out under those scenarios. I appreciate your tolerance. Conservation is about education. My take-home message is give turf a chance, have a lawn to your liking. And when you listen this long about turf, I say it's a good day for turf in Texas. So, thank you.